I've been meaning to make a video on the Stormcast Eternals for the last few months. I'm fairly late to the party, but I figured I better late than never. So Mr. Yun asked me my thoughts on the Stormcast a few months ago now, almost. And so I'm now doing a video on that. It shouldn't be too long. I just want to kind of go over a few of the points. And first off, let me say, I collect everything, so I will be collecting a Stormcast army. I have the starter box set just over to my right. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much of a problem with the concept of the army in terms of the fluff and how it operates on the tabletop. I think it's a decent army. I like the idea of uh, of an army taking it to chaos finally, and so I do like that concept. People obviously aren't too happy about the fact that they look like Space Marines. I've talked about this in a number of my earlier videos. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a smart move by the company. Space Marines make buckets of money. Space Marine armies account for probably about half of the profit for Games Workshop in their other game system. It makes perfect sense. Also, I would point out Space Marines are designed to look like medieval knights, right? The origin of all the factions in 40k, with the exception of Tyranids and Tau, is really from the traditional game of Warhammer, and they were placed in this context in space. So again, you had Beastmen, Slann, you still have the elves, you have the orcs, and you had a whole bunch of other races that are now really not part of 40k, but were once part of 40k. You had ogres and halflings and all that stuff in 40k. So I think that's always something to consider. I mean, I don't think it's that surprising that they look like Space Marines, because Space Marines are supposed to look like medieval knights. And it's a smart move because, again, Space Marines are a huge moneymaker, so why not make something that looks very similar? The rules for the Stormcast are fairly simplistic and easy and basic. They're, good armor save. It's that they're like Space Marines. They operate the same way. They're an easy beginner army. Everyone, when you look at the concept of the army, you're not confused about how it operates. It looks the way it operates, or operates the way it looks. Some people aren't too happy about the fact that they use bows and heavy armor and things like that. Now, understand that the way it has worked traditionally in Warhammer Fantasy is that fantasy was more of a mirror of human history. Then Age of Sigmar is way out there. They don't have to conform to the same historical standards. And there are specific historical reasons why someone with a bow is not heavily armored. And those don't apply, in my mind, to Age of Sigmar. It's a completely different context. Now, with regard to the bows and crossbows, and the same word as the Space Marine weaponry, right? So you got the crossbow bolt and the lightning bolt and the bolter in 40k. Again, I'm not really sure if you can draw a direct, that they specifically did that, because there's a parallel there. They both have the word bolt, but they're in a completely different context in terms of how they're being used and operated. But anyway, going back to the basics, in the future, I'm not really sure what's going to happen to these guys. They lose a bit of their personality every time they die, which is problematic. I don't get much of a sense that their ranks are growing constantly. So if you extrapolate that over the next maybe a couple years, when we would assume that each of the Stormcasts has been killed, a number of times, that I think that's a problem because they don't really have a whole lot of personality now. And we see examples in the quest for Galmaraz and such of Stormcast dying, and they come back differently, and they've lost a bit of their personality because of how they were killed and things like that. Yeah, I think that's probably a problem because again they don't have a lot of personality now. They decided not to have models without helmets for whatever reason, I guess to make them more mysterious. A lot of Space Marines don't have helmets, and at least gives them the sense that they're human beings. Um, I've read a lot of comments from people on Facebook and things that would indicate that they don't think that these are actually human beings in these in the suits of armor, and that's a huge problem. In the novels and in the artwork up close, they clearly are human beings, and the fact that some people aren't recognizing that's a huge problem, I think. And so going forward, if they lose their personality as we go, I don't really know what they're going to do. There are a few instances in these books when the Stormcast try to make like humor, where they try to make a joke, and it really falls flat because it's just out of the blue. We don't get a sense of the Stormcast at home when they're not at war, when they're just having casual conversation and having fun, or like not on duty, not in the middle of a fight. And so these little glimmers, they're hard to really imagine. The Space Marines, though, have traditionally had that problem, and they really go back and forth. There's short stories where they're really stoic, and then other short stories where they're just constantly making jokes, and it's more like the Marines of modern day, where they're just kind of out there when they're not on duty. And so I don't really know what to really think of that in that context of what's going to happen going forward with the faction. I think it's interesting. I certainly like the look. I don't have a problem with that. I have a few ideas of ways to kind of make them a little bit more personable for my tastes. I'm a history guy, so I plan on making a unit based upon the Romans. No hammers in that unit. That would be the other weapon options. But the other thing is that there is a lot of room to expand. I'm reminded of the fact that at the beginning of 40K, things like the Horus Heresy were really non-existent. There's a paragraph in the Rogue Trader book on Horus Heresy, just a small paragraph. That's it. And it took years to really flush out those ideas because people need to have an interest in it. I think it would be a mistake for them to give us this huge comprehensive book on exactly how all the mechanics are working, how these Stormcasts are being remade, the exact particulars of it. I think it would just be overwhelming. So I think they gave us like a pamphlet, essentially. It does mention how the Stormcasts are made in the books, but it's very brief. And then I think over the years, they're going to provide more details on that. So I guess that's my overview of the Stormcast, and thanks for watching.